So to kind of transition us away from that, we mentioned him just a little bit ago. Jordan Addison's been in the news lately, and you said it not too long ago, maybe within the last 2 episodes. You said there's not a lot of news happening right now, and typically the only news that happens in this time frame of the NFL calendar year is if you get busted for doing something stupid. And that's kind of where Jordan Addison found himself just a few days ago.
Yeah, I mean, he got arrested overnight on it was either a Friday night into a Saturday morning. And it seems like more information has come out since, obviously we first heard about it. First it was, Addison was arrested on suspicion of DWI. I guess he was asleep, stopped. His vehicle was stopped, but he was asleep behind the wheel. I think I even saw he was in a lane of traffic on the interstate, it sounds dangerous. I don't know where it was. And then I guess today, we're recording Monday the 15th of July. Today it sounds like there's speculation it just said DWI. I think Ben Gessling said there wasn't any information about a blood alcohol content, which apparently could mean that it was marijuana and not alcohol, but still it sounds like he was falling asleep behind the wheel of a car, so you probably, I don't care what the substance is. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be behind the wheel. It just seems super dumb, especially with what happened a few weeks ago with his teammate, Kyrie Jackson, going through that horrible incident involving, I think they've even said now, involving alcohol, losing his life. So you'd think he'd be a little bit more careful. But like we were just saying with Justin Jefferson, seeming like a 23, 24-year-old kid, Addison is 22. And not to be an excuse, but for all the people that first saw it, it's how could you do this? Why would you think that way? I don't know. I'm not 22 anymore, but I know I was not the smartest 22-year-old kid. Doesn't excuse anything. I mean, Uber is too easy of a thing to call. And if you can't do Uber, I'm sure there's other options. Don't ever. We're a podcast that features beer every week. Don't ever drive drunk or under the influence at all. It's too easy to not do that stuff. So that's pretty disappointing. Thank goodness seems like nobody was hurt in that incident, but yeah.
It is interesting. I mean, we probably don't want to get super analytical with stuff, but it was interesting he was released less than 2 hours after he was detained, which seems to indicate maybe it wasn't super serious. And there's an absence of a BAC, which means they didn't breathalyze him probably. So maybe they didn't suspect alcohol, which could be some other substance, we don't know. Or I mean, it could just have been a medical emergency. Well, yeah, I mean,
we don't have every single piece of detail, but I mean, I think they did officially say suspicion of the DWI or whatever. So.
Yeah, but then on the other side of all of that, he did, I think just today, delete a lot of his social media, removed any Vikings sort of stuff from anything that he's posted.
You can't find anything. Somebody messaged me today and was like, dude, Addison's posting some dumb stuff on Twitter. It's so I went to go find it and couldn't find his account at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe somebody who's smarter told him to delete some stuff, but yeah, I'm trying to pull it up now to see if anything's back up, because he could have just I don't know, disabled his account for a little while. I'm not seeing anything yet.
I think a few articles I've read have kind of predicted maybe that a suspension could be coming his way, depending.
And
but you don't know.
You break the rules, you gotta. Especially with something like people could die. This is not a laughing matter.
Yeah. I think you tweeted it on our account. Maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was someone else. I can't remember. Maybe you commented on somebody's, but you mentioned Cris Carter. Was that you?
That wasn't me.
That wasn't you? Somebody out there mentioned Cris Carter, and they just said, Cris Carter had a rough start to his NFL career, and we're going to be talking about Cris Carter here in a little bit, because we're in that series of numbers. And I've got a couple of pictures of him behind us here. But anyways, Yeah, when he was drafted by the Eagles, I'm pretty sure, and spent the first 2 or 3 years of his career in Philly, and he was in tough shape, and he didn't really turn his life around until he came to Minnesota, and Denny Green kind of got a hold of him and really helped him. I think Coach Green helped Cris Carter turn his life around in a pretty positive direction, and he's now arguably the best receiver or one of the best receivers in franchise history.
You've kind of turned, not to talk about Carter too much before we get there, but you've turned me around in saying, I'll say Carter was a better Viking than Randy Moss.
Carter was a way better receiver than Randy Moss because he retired as a Viking, and I think he's atop the list for receiving yards at the very least, is he not? We can check that.
He might be, yeah.
And not that it's a competition. I mean, Randy Moss was obviously a really, really good wide receiver. He just ended up bouncing around to a bunch of different teams after he left the Vikings. And he came back to the Vikings once, and it wasn't great. But I don't know. Cris Carter, man, he's a guy that I've always looked up to, and that's why I have a few pictures of him and a few trading cards of his in my little display case back here. And whatever tweet I read or article I read or whatever just kind of pointed Jordan Addison to Cris Carter.
Yep.
Like, hey, a guy that played for your franchise, walked a similar path.
They probably talk to each other.
You might want to get in touch with him. And Cris Carter, if you're out there listening, help us out. Come alongside this kid, help him walk the straight and narrow, because we like watching him play, just like we liked watching you play back in the day.
Although Carter did get in some heat, I guess this is like 9 years ago now.
Yeah, he was in the news a little bit for some of his comments.
Yeah, I pulled it up. He's telling NFL rookies, like, hey, you gotta have a fall guy. Like, always, if you're hanging out and doing some stuff, like, make sure one of the guys you're hanging out with is ready to take the fall for any trouble you're getting into. And I'm paraphrasing that, of course, but like that one, probably not horrible advice, especially if you're talking to people that are going to get in trouble at some point. But also, like, that's also still horrible advice. Like, that's just don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Like,
don't do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Just be a professional.
So maybe he's saying that as a guy who's experienced some stuff and knows, I'm talking to a bunch of kids that are about to get in a bunch of trouble at some point. So if you're going to do that, have a fall guy, but also maybe just teach them not to be more like Kirk Cousins. Go home and read books to your kids.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll just to maybe kind of wrap this up on Jordan Addison before we get into the numbers here. You got to wonder if the Kyrie Jackson stuff had an effect on him a little bit. If he was maybe reeling from that a little bit, and not justifying if someone close to you passes away or whatever, go just off the deep end. We're not justifying that, but that would be understandable. Yeah, man, that's a tough thing. Your teammate is gone, and you got to cope, but this isn't the way to do that.
Yeah, for sure.